most of the time, when we hear about drug traffickers, they're born into abject poverty in a village somewhere in El Salvador, Venezuela, Mexico, whatever, in Sinaloa, and they grow up as gangsters. But that wasn't your story at all. Tell me how you grew up. It's quite different than most other sort of drug traffickers we would hear of.
I grew up in an affluent family. I was born in Cuba. My parents were wealthy people, wealthy in the wealthy sense, you know, very wealthy. And my dad was in the sugar business. So we came from Cuba, on a Pan Am airplane, and we stayed at the Key Biscayne Hotel. And I grew up in a very privileged background, private schools, house on Key Biscayne, um, excellent friends, excellent relationships, top notch yacht club parties. Uh, I grew up, yacht club life, let's say.
Is this
Uh,
pre-Castro, or you moved
no,
from
no,
Cuba to Miami?
from Cuba to Miami.
Because I was like, you're not that old, man.
No, I was, 5 years old when I got to Miami.
Okay.
But my parents were very affluent. My dad had sugar business, had an apartment in New York City at the Sherry Netherland, then at the St. Regis. I was always exposed to a life of wealth. And I went to Georgetown University, where I met, wealthy people from South America. And then I got into this business, just because
How?
I met a girl from Aruba, and I thought, we fell in lust immediately, and in love and lust, but there was a certain attraction immediate, and then we started going out, and she told me she was in the emerald business. And soon enough, she told me, no, it's not the emerald business. But what I saw was a lot of money. The first time I ever saw money in this business was $6.5 million. Not like I started selling grams and, making $1,000. If I wanted to do that, I was working with my dad's sugar business. It was huge. And so that's part of the reason I stayed in the business, because it was with a girl that I was in love with,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a very high style living and business at a level that was not, from the ground. It was at the highest levels. She was one of the highest distributors for the Medellin cartel. She had excellent connections. I mean, it's not like we were hustling to buy a kilo. They deliver
Right.
100, 200 kilos to her on a phone call, and we'd fly them out in a Learjet. Met on the other side in San Francisco by very nice, very honest American guys that were involved in the hash trade from years ago, but it wasn't a criminal mentality. The people that did hash and marijuana back then were not into guns and were not into killing. They were not cocaine cowboys. They were just very intelligent, very off the beaten path, off the grid type people that decided to get involved in smuggling.
Okay, so you met this girl, and she was like, hey, by the way, I'm selling emeralds. And you're like, wow, you're making even more money than my dad is in the sugar business. And she's like, by the way, I'm selling cocaine. So you didn't, like you said, you didn't start out going, man, I want to sell drugs. You came up affluent, and you saw even more money. And it was like, well, this is fun, and this is easy, and this is even more money than I'm getting, than I grew up with. So that's appealing to somebody. How old were you at that time?
I was 22.
Okay, so you're 22, so money, and you're with a girl and you're flying around on a jet that, I don't know, who she owns or something like that, or flying
Well,
cocaine around.
it was
That's pretty
leased.
appealing.
The,
Least.
the
Yeah.
thing is,
Okay,
that
fine.
did I want to get into drugs? No, because drugs is like nasty. It's dirty. You got to hang out in a street corner and sell. Like, no, no, no. We never saw the drugs. I mean, we did. We saw, suitcases flash across us, and it's not like we had to cut the stuff or do this, do that. It was just what we lived was what happened was the drugs shifted hands, and then we just in the time of between it shifted hands and we were waiting to get paid the 6.5 million, 7, 10 million, we would just have a great life waiting around and just living a beautiful life, going to the best hotels, the best restaurants, shopping. Really, it's not very, it's kind of shallow, let's say.
Well, you're 22 years old. Everybody's shallow when they're 22, man.
And we were going to the best restaurants. Just money was never an issue. Excessive amounts of money. It was millions and millions in your hand. It's not 30.
And it's cash. So you have to
Yeah.
spend it, right? I
Yeah.
get it. You're 22. Money corrupts really easily when you're that age.
Yeah. And it's not like you have to go out and sell every day and hustle every day. You just handed somebody that's a trustworthy player 200 kilos, and he in a month he'll come back with 6-7 million. By the end of 2 months, the balance of the 13 million. And before that, you had already given him another 150 kilos. So we were always owed 10-15 million dollars. Always.
Unreal.
And it's just this money coming in and coming in. And sure, you have to be responsible. You got to make sure you get the money back to Miami. Back then, later on, we just had to make sure we got it banked in LA. But
Banked. So when you say banked, do you mean literally you were walking the money into the bank in LA at this time?
no, we never did that because we
No,
never
okay.
would expose our face to bankers or stuff like that. We gave it to Colombians that were in charge of handling the money.
Right, okay. They
They would-
laundered the money. Yeah.
They would receive suitcases from us in a hotel lobby, in a parked car, and somewhere we'd hand over the money. And it was never like guns and wow, we're gonna get no. It was just like you had to hand over $3-4 million. You meet the guys, have it in the trunk of the car. You'd hand over the keys in the lobby of a hotel. They'd take the car. You would never want to see that car. It's a throwaway. I don't know what they did with it, but very non-criminal activity type stuff. No guns. Nobody yelled at nobody. Nobody threatened nobody. Nobody got, tied up and, their knees got drilled. Nothing. And
Nothing,
she was
yeah.
very well respected because she was the goose that laid the golden eggs. So it was very, nonchalant, great living.
And then you go from this to like, I would imagine probably the most successful cocaine smuggler in U.S. history. I mean, there's a jump here and there's a story here. But your
I don't
original-
think so. I think
No?
probably the Italian mafia did more than I did. as a
Yeah, well,
whole.
I should say single smuggler, like this
Well,
as a single guy. I think, yeah, the whole
single.
mafia, sure, but as a guy with a plane or whatever it was.
At that
you
time, I was doing quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Jesse Fink, the guy who introduced us, the guy who wrote your book, he's pretty sure that you have single-handedly smuggled a certain amount, and we'll get into what that is, and that's more than anybody else single-handedly did. Whole organizations, yeah, I'm sure they have you beat, but that's kind of like saying you got beat in basketball by the entire LA Lakers. You're not just talking about one player; you're talking about the whole team. So when you started, did you have a plan? Like, all right, I'm going to make $10 million. I'm going to buy a couple of houses and I'm getting the hell out of this business. Did you have some kind of plan like that?
Initially, no. Initially, I fell into it. I was living in a lust relationship. And I did love this girl. We did, we were together. And I was just living life to the fullest every day. And I had a life with her. But was I planning, well, let's see, we're going to make $1 million. Let's buy those apartment buildings over there. No, I was just like living life. Later on, when I broke up with her, or she broke up with me, I started thinking maybe I should buy a couple of these old hotels on Miami Beach. Hotels on South Beach back when the Mariel boat lift came. A hotel that goes for 80 million today was going for 650,000, 450,000 back then.
Wow.
And
the Mariel boat lift, that's when a lot of the Cubans came to the United States?
Yes. And then South Beach was flooded with the, homeless Cubans and a lot of nasty people came on that boat lift, and a lot of very prominent people that today are very prominent people did very well for themselves, also came on that boat lift. But the image that boat lift has is because Fidel did let loose a bunch of insane asylums and emptied out his jails and sent them over here. And we did deal with a criminal element that was never seen before. Such a criminal element that in the BOP, the Bureau of Prisons, people from Mariel are category, there's a category, special category for them, because for the first time in the history of the federal system, these Mariel Cubans that were sent to Atlanta Federal Penitentiary, they took over the penitentiary. They created a huge riot. They burnt a large part of the place, held the guards hostage. These were violent, nasty, crazy criminal people. They did the same thing in Talladega. They took over the whole place, took over the guards, held them hostage. Atrocity, and it's you can Google it. Federal riots, Mariel Cubans in prison system. So these guys, they were so out of control that not even inmates ever saw creatures like this. There's certain laws in prison that you abide by, certain respect. Don't go to the bathroom in the showers. You don't throw the feces to each other. These guys violated everything, and they became total thorn in the side for the federal system. And that's what was in Miami at that time. Miami was faced with a large number of these criminal, crazy elements that came from Cuba.
How did you tell me about your first cocaine deal? So you met this girl and she probably sort of I guess handheld you through some of the initial stages of this. Like you said, you weren't buying a couple grams from a dealer and you're like, I think I can make a business out of this. You got connected to the cartels essentially right away.
Immediately, yes.
Yeah. And when she broke up with you, you kept all the connections. She wasn't like, don't deal with this guy. He's my competition. We're not together anymore. She was just like, go off and start your own business.
She didn't mind at all. As a matter of fact, she said, if you're going to continue, might as well continue with my connections that are proven, decent. I don't want you, dealing half a kilo or a kilo or 5 kilos down in Miami and getting your head blown off or
Yeah.
getting kidnapped and killed. If you're going to continue, I mean, there's enough for everybody. You can continue. As a matter of fact, you can continue with my supply sources too. She turned me on to the people that were giving her the merchandise. And since I was a decent, honest guy that they felt comfortable with, they knew I wasn't going to rip them off. They started giving me 100, 150, 200 kilos like they used to give her. And on the receiving end, I had the people that could handle that weight. So your goodwill goes through the roof. She got involved with another boyfriend, and that boyfriend was well off on his own, and he didn't want her to continue working. So also that played into her saying, you take over. I'm gonna be a housewife for a while. I'm gonna be a housewife. My husband doesn't want me to work. He was a smuggler himself,
Oh,
but he didn't want her to work, which it makes sense.
sure.
You don't want your wife involved in something that could get her in trouble. They had a
Sure.
couple kids, so it makes sense. So I ran with that, and from the clients that I inherited from her, and with those sources of supply that I also inherited from her, I expanded my network. Then started selling down in LA, in Chicago, and New York. I stayed away from Miami. I didn't want to work in Miami. I kind of lived here part time, so I didn't want to work here.
Ah, okay. Interesting that you kept it away from that. Where did you smuggle the drugs from? I mean, we were talking pre-show, and you asked me how my trip to the Amazon jungle was, and I said, "Well, you might have a little firsthand knowledge of how my trip to the Amazon jungle was." Where were you taking the drugs from primarily?
Well, actually, our first smuggle. See, when I was in Miami with her, I was just receiving and distributing. I
Okay,
wasn't smuggling. When I
gotcha.
decided to smuggle, the first smuggle we ever did, we bought the paste down in Leticia, which is down in the Colombian Amazon. It's a little peninsula, and at the tip is Leticia. That was a big center for receiving paste and then taking it up to Colombia and processing it into cocaine. So the first smuggle we ever did, we bought 100 kilos down in Leticia. And we smuggled that up to Miami. But then after that, we we used to just I bought a Merlin and then I bought two Conquests
These are
and
jets or airplanes?
no turboprops.
Props. Okay.
Yeah. And then we used to just, I used to contract with the source of supply. They had their runways down there, and I would come in and land, load up, and leave. And we would usually work out of the coast, out of Monteria, out of Pereira, somewhere not too south of Colombia because we needed to make up, the ground of flying up to Mexico or airdropping in the Bahamas. The relatively, you got to be very conscious of gas consumption.
Sure. Why did
So
you need 3 planes? You're flying the plane, right? You can only
no,
fly
no,
one at
no,
a time.
no,
You weren't flying it.
no, no,
Okay.
no.
Gotcha.
Those were planes that I owned, and I had different pilots because we had different routes. At one time, I could have had 5, 6, 7 routes, and that I needed. I was you. Sometimes I had 3 of my own planes and leased 3 more.
Okay.
And I used to lease a Cheyenne 4, a Cheyenne 2, a Cheyenne 3, Turbo Commanders. I leased a lot of times. I leased Turbo Commanders to go to Mexico, and my own planes, which were the Conquest, I used to use to go to Mexico and to airdrop in the Bahamas. It's a very good plane to airdrop with. The Merlin, I used to use for landing. I used to never airdrop with the Merlin.
When you say airdrop, is it what it sounds like, where you're dropping things while you're still flying, just packages out the back,
Yes.
kind of thing?
You slow down, you slow the plane down, you come down close to the water, open the back door, and start kicking out those bales.
Wow. While someone else is flying the plane, who's kicking out the bales? Or are you like, hey, this thing will go straight for a while?
No, there's a kicker. There's a
Okay.
there's
That makes more sense.
there's a pilot, there's a co-pilot, there's a kicker in the back.
Wow. And they just land what, in the water or the jungle?
No, they don't land. You have to calculate it so you have
No, the bales. The bales land.
oh, the bales land in the water. Yes, they
Okay.
float. They float, and you put little lights on them, little
Glow sticks.
glow sticks. You crack them, throw them, crack them, throw them. That's usually done at night, obviously. The
Yeah. Wow. And so someone's out there, like in a boat, just going around to the little glow sticks and trying to find them. Yeah, man, they better hope you do a good job with the airdrop then, or those could be anywhere.
yes, you need to wrap it the right way so they're waterproof. They float, and usually you have the coordinated because the people that you're dropping to are veteran smugglers, and the pilot is a veteran bush pilot. That's what we call them, bush pilots. Off the radar type pilots, and they know what they're doing.
Yeah. This is before. Think about this though. Like I'm wrapping my head around this. This is before GPS. You don't have cell phones, so you can't just like you make these arrangements days, weeks before, and you say, all right, be in the water with a boat outside of Letizia or whatever it is, or outside the Aruba, whatever, in the water, and we're going to be at some point that night. So they're waiting a few hours for you, but there's still coordination that without internet, without GPS, without cell phones, you still had to make these kinds of pretty precise calculations and arrangements for them to get your stuff.
Yes, the plane had a Loran, and we always use coordinates. We use two-way radios. No, back then there weren't any cellular phones, but two-way radios. So they did get to the point. They did get to the point.
It's still pretty amazing because I think it would be hard to do that even now with GPS and something that automatically dumps the bales out the back at the exact right spot. I mean, you're looking at a map and that guy has to like kick these bales out as fast as humanly possible so they're not spread out over 40 miles, right?
Yeah, and you're in a cramped space. You're not in a C-130. You're in a small turboprop. And on top of that, you have the merchandise, plus you have the bladder or the timbos, the the canisters where you carry the gas. Because remember, you, the plane itself doesn't have enough gas. You have to rig the tubing, the gas tubing of the plane in a certain way so you can after you can start feeding it gas from inside because you need to take on board the coke, the extra fuel, plus the fuel in the wings of the plane in the normal gas tank.
So you kind of rig the plane so that you can refuel it in flight by carrying extra gas. Like you extend the gas tank a bit. Wow. Wow. That sounds dangerous.
And gas, well, water weighs more than gas, but water weighs 8 pounds, 8 pounds per gallon. Gas is 7.5 pounds per gallon, more or less 7 pounds per gallon. Gas is lighter than water. But that's a big weight. That's a
lot of weight. Yeah, that's a lot of weight in a turboprop. And then you kick a bunch of it out, and then you're more fuel efficient after that. But still, that's super freaking dangerous.
Yeah, and when you go down, the plane consumes more gas because the lower you are, the more it consumes a massive amount of gas, as opposed to when you're at high altitude. You have to take all that into account because you're going from point A to point B, but you're not landing. You're just circling, airdropping, and coming back. It's there's been so many plane accidents, and I lost my partner on an airdrop. They got killed. Everybody on the plane got killed
because he crashed.
Yeah, the airplane. We received that plane near Pereira, and when it came in from Venezuela, the Venezuelan pilots that were in charge of the plane in Venezuela. These guys are with, they used to be Air Force, Army or Venezuelan Air Force, whatever that means.
Yeah.
But they landed in Pereira and they told us the plane has certain reports. We don't suggest doing this trip because they get off, they go to a hotel while the Bush pilots hop on. We erase the call letters, change the call letters, and proceed with, our smuggling mission. They said, we do not suggest you go forward. We can go back to Venezuela, but we do not think the plane is in conditions to do an airdrop. It's different when you're asking the plane to do things up and beyond what the manual says.
So they just thought this is an old plane that's not been maintained well. It's probably not going to make it.
No, it wasn't an old plane, but it was due for checkup that weren't done. And my partner back then, Renee, that was part of his job, taking care of the plane. I bought the plane, but I handed it over to him as, let's say, chief operating officer.
The COO,
and he was on the strip with me, and the pilot did not get off. He said, I'll do it. I guess he needed the money. The co-pilot said, I'm not going. The Bush co-pilot, not the Venezuelan co-pilot. They were off the plane. The co-pilot got off. And since Rene knew something about flying because he owned an airplane sales center here in South Florida, he hopped on as co-pilot. And that's when he hopped on, I almost hopped on too. I wanted to go along just for the ride. And that's when Marulo told me, what the hell are you doing up there? Get off. I said, no, I'm going with Rene. Says, if something happens, who's going to pay me for the merchandise? Sure enough, when they got the Dog Rock, which is where we were airdropping right off the Florida Keys, in the Bahamas, in the middle there, they went down. They lost power in one engine, and they just cartwheeled right into the ocean. Everybody.
Oh, man.
I would have been on that plane. Marulo saved my life.
Who's Maduro?
The source of supply, the guy that we worked with that gave us the merchandise. He saved my life.
Wow. I mean, you've had a lot of close calls. I assume at some points, though, you are landing in the jungle. Going back to what we were saying pre-show, you had to sleep over in the middle of nowhere sometimes, literally in the Amazon. And that's kind of what I was doing. And they would say, hey, don't leave the hotel ground. Don't walk out there at night, unless you're with a guide and a light and all this stuff, because there's a lot of stuff out in the jungle and we don't necessarily know what all is out there, but you don't want it to find you before you see it with your headlamp, basically.
There's everything out there. I mean, it's, ecotourism, but you go out on your own, like where we were. A lot of places where you know people didn't hang out. There were no hotels. It was the middle of nowhere. That's why we
Mhm.
were smuggling there. We'd build a runway in the middle of nowhere, like in Belize, out in western Belize. We worked there. We had a runway. You had to take turns. You had to go with somebody. You had to be very careful. You just can't, hey, I need to take a piss and walk out. A jaguar will snap you up. There's jaguars out there. You hear the monkeys, you hear everything, all kinds of snakes, you know. I mean, you got to really be aware of your surroundings. You're not in a luxury hotel just surrounded by nature. It's You're out in the middle of nowhere in the jungle. God forbid something happens, you die. There's no hospital, there's nothing. But that's why we were there. So I seen, talk about ecotourism. I've been in some really ecotouristic places where
I
nobody's
bet.
been,
I
and
bet.
nobody wants to go there.
You said that smuggling is the most important part of the drug business because, of course, if you can't smuggle, there's nothing people can sell, and the producers don't make money either. Is one of the reasons that you were so in demand is because you it seems like you had a pretty good system, right? With the planes, did you only smuggle by plane?
No, we did also fast boats.
Okay.
Yeah, we did fast boats, and it got to a point where we had to stop the planes because of the radars, and then we started going by water. But most of our smuggles were airdrops to boats, and the boats in the Bahamas, and the boats in the Bahamas to Miami by boat. So it was by air to the Bahamas, airdrop, by boat to Miami. When Mexico came into the picture, we started airdropping off Cozumel, the island of Cozumel, Mexico, and
Hmm.
boats into the mainland, into Cancun, for example. But then we just started going 100% by water. So we would go from the northern coast of Colombia in Necoclí, in an area of Urabá, in Necoclí, all the way to Cancun, Mexico. We refueled at Banco Serranilla, north of San Andres. That's a long haul. And
Yeah.
we were doing it in these 32-foot boats that were like half submerged. I mean, they were very low to the water. Very successful. We did a lot of trips.
What? How many
Then we did a
kilos at a
lot.
time are you talking about? Oh, whoops. Sorry. Go ahead.
We would do 1,200 up to 1,600 kilos on a boatload.
That's how many kilos you're doing at a time. Yeah. Like, what's the value of that each load? What kind of money are we talking about here?
Well, let's say 1,600. Let's say 1,600 kilos. When they get to Mexico back then, they were at 5,000. That's $9 million. When they get to the U.S., they were selling at 15, 20 back then. So, I mean, you're talking, $30 million when they get to the US. That's at those prices. That's very low pricing. That was in the early 90s or stuff. There was a time that there was so much coke that the price went down. But there each load is at least 30 to $50 million.
Wow.
And I mean, with one friend, we did 44 trips. I mean, that's 60,000 kilos.
Over what period of time?
We did That was 92, 93, 94, 95.
Over a period of years, yeah, that's a hell of a lot of money. And are you then living a normal family life at this point? Because I know you eventually married and had kids. Like, are you living essentially a normal-ish family life while transporting hundreds of millions of dollars in cocaine? Was it like fly a load from Peru to Miami, be home in time for dinner?
Yes, I did have a normal family life, and I had a normal business, and I'd go to work, and at 12:30, I'd go home for lunch. We would have lunch and maybe take a little siesta. go back to work at 4:30 and finish work at 7:30. And I had a coffee operation in Cancun. I have a latex rubber glove operation in Mexico City. I had the macadamia plantations in Mexico and in Costa Rica. And I was doing my legal business and having a normal family life. And at the same time, we were bringing in thousands and thousands of kilos through Cancun uh, every week.
Did your family know anything about this? They probably not, right? I mean, I assume you didn't
Not the
share.
details.
Uh-huh.
My wife and I were close, of course, and she knew what I was involved in. She didn't know the specifics. I mean, uh, you know, specifics of specifics, but obviously she knew what I did because when I met her in Colombia, it was almost like I was always doing it with a nice group of people. Back then, it was more acceptable than now, and I was always dealing with a nice group of people, and it wasn't the craziness that you hear today. The people I dealt with were my friends, but it's not what I did; it's how long I did it for. That's the thing. I did it for 25 years,
Oh my God.
nonstop, and
Yeah, that's a full career.
it never got smaller. I started with 9 ounces. The first 9 ounces I ever sold in Georgetown, which I should have been studying. I should have never gotten involved in selling ounces. I mean, and I just did it so we could party and, for the hell of it. But until I got caught, when I got caught in the year 2000, I had 25 tons, which is 25,000 kilos. That was the seizure. You're not talking conspiracy here. You're talking actual merchandise on the ground that was seized, 25,000 kilos,
What is the value of a shipment like that?
a billion.
$1 billion. Yeah, that's a lot of cocaine. And we'll
Yeah.
get to that in a bit. Because that's
I
a
would
hell of a
say,
lot. I mean, that's got to be one of the largest seizures ever.
yeah. And at that point, it was the largest. And that was going to Europe, where we were getting a good chunk of change for that.
Sure. Sure.
That was selling
Wow.
it, some of it going to even, you know, pricier places like England. That was
Wow.
most of that merchandise was bound for Italy and Spain, but some of it was making its way to England also through some of our sources.
Goodness. So you must have had a lot of contingency plans and things like this, right? Did you carry like 10 grand on your person at all times?
Oh
I
no,
mean,
that's like 10 grand is like
or 100 grand. I mean, what did you think you
a
would
hundred
need
grand.
to escape?
No, 100 grand is something you keep in a shoebox or something you have in your closet there for whatever. I mean, our contingency plan, we lost touch with reality. While I was in Venezuela, I was talking to my Greek partner, and we were going to refinance. We had ships, so I said it's no good to have these ships cashed out and paid for. We should finance it and use some of that money plus some of our proceeds from our earnings. So let's take 50 million and try to corner the Central American coffee market. And that's what we were trying to do when I got back to Europe. Your mind is, you know, off the charts. It's not dealing with reality. Instead of saying I'm going to retire, I got 2 kids, I got my wife. Let's see if we can get together, maybe settle down. Sitting here doing massive amounts of cocaine via freighters, because we would take 5 to 6,000 kilos on each freighter. And instead of saying let's settle down, let me meddle, it kind of corner the coffee market with some Swiss bank. I mean, you guys are nuts. And that's the way I thought. You stop thinking small on anything.
Were you worried at all about getting popped by police? I mean, did you have like emergency cash on your person or gold or anything like that or multiple
Em-
identities
Emergency.
maybe?
Oh, multiple identities. Yes. Cash. I mean, when I got arrested, probably, I had a checking account with maybe 900,000 in it. And you always have 25, 30,000 dollars available, but there's just so much you can carry on you, and you don't use credit cards. What credit cards you have under a false name, and I probably have more spending power now as a legal individual than I did, because when you're a fugitive, your spending power is what you have on you or what you have access to. You take a taxi to a stash apartment, then you grab some cash. But while you're standing there and you don't have access to that taxi to get to that stash house, you don't have an American Express Gold card with $100,000 spending limit. You know, in that sense, you're a little limited. Although I had a checking account with 900,000. Well, yeah, maybe I did have more spending power.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
than
don't
most
know.
people. I would say 900,000 in a checking account. One, it's just a bad place to keep $900,000 because there's no interest on it, but you didn't care. But either way, back in the 90s, not a whole lot of people had 900 grand in a checking account. I heard that you always used the same initials on your false identities because you had monogrammed shirts. Is that true?
Yes, I
Just
figured I never got rid of the shirts, and I figured I never want to be in a situation where shit, I'm going through an airport and I've got one of these shirts on. I should have, and so just in case, I just had the same initials.
right.
Coming up to a customs guy and George Perez, and it says LN on your shirt, he may get a little spiffy to that.
Yeah, suspicious. Yeah, for sure. That's yeah, that's good thinking, I suppose, to keep that at least congruent there. So 80s Miami cocaine dealing, partying, like paint this picture for us because I know Cubans and Colombians are in the business, but it wasn't exactly a marriage made in heaven for those two groups. There was a lot of like assassins coming in by boat, to say the least.
Yes. At first, the Cubans had Miami, and they had the connections to New York and Chicago and in Miami, and the Colombians would supply the coke to the Cubans. Remember, you're dealing with cocaine. Um, the marijuana people were a little more easy to deal with, more honorable, let's say. When you're dealing with cocaine, now you got the lowest of the Colombians with the lowest of the Cubans. So they're going to end up, bad people will end up doing some bad things. You got to be nuts to think that bad people will not do bad things. So it got into a turf war over here. Eventually, the Colombians took over. The Colombians, you know, uh, took over the Miami area. Then they took over in New York, took over in Chicago, and they dominated the distribution of cocaine in the United States. Um, that changed when everybody started getting busted, and U.S. started nailing all the Colombian money routes, and um, they handed it over to the Mexicans. Now, distribution of cocaine in the United States is in the hands of the Mexicans. The Colombians want no part of it. I'm not saying there aren't some Colombian groups importing some stuff through the Bahamas or through Haiti or through Santo Domingo, but most of the cocaine goes to Mexico. Colombian Mexicans will buy from Colombians, from Peruvians, uh, from Ecuador, not mostly Peru, Colombia. Although Ecuador is a big trampoline now, but it's run
What
by
do you mean by trampoline?
um, a point of exit, an exit point. Uh, the Mexicans will take have their Colombian sources deliver the cocaine in Ecuador, and from Ecuador, the Mexicans will take it to Europe, Asia, Mexico. The Mexicans have grown immensely. They're the biggest money group in the business nowadays. They've grown exponentially. Uh, they control the U.S. distribution. Colombians don't really want to get involved in the U.S. They've already been through that. Colombians are taking it to more profitable market like China, India, Australia, Japan, Indonesia, and Europe. Those are the Colombian markets. But Ecuador, Mexicans have access to these markets now using Ecuador as an exit point, and they're huge. The Mexicans are huge. Mexicans have more money than the Colombians, probably.
Yeah, I mean that's my experience sort of begins and ends with watching Narcos and reading books like the one that you have, but yeah, that's the common refrain. And so when you're partying in Miami and enjoying kind of this high life, I assume you're getting high on your own supply, right? You're sort of breaking the one of the commandments, which is if you've got all this money and you've got all this coke and you're partying all the time, you're probably using a little bit of it, right?
Yes, unfortunately, and it was a big mistake. Um, I got into the lifestyle of, when you go out and you drink and you party, I used to, you know, use a little bit of my own supply. At least it was very good because if it would have been very bad, maybe I would have died of an overdose. That's why I think it should be legalized. It's the only way to control the health factor. And on top of that, been proven that this drug war has been a total failure. The attitude towards cocaine has been a total failure as far as it having a drug war goes. That it's a bad drug, it's a very bad drug, but keep your enemies closer type
Yeah,
deal.
I definitely want to talk more about your suggestions and how you feel about that in a bit. I know some of the ways you spent money. This is from the book. $50,000 at a hotel. This might be a little embarrassing. $45,000 for hookers over 3 days. Okay, what kind of hookers are we talking about? Where it's $15,000 a day? I mean, is this just a lot of different hookers, or are they extreme? How do you even spend 45 grand on hookers?
I mean, it's crazy. It's a crazy lifestyle. Number one, you don't party by yourself because
Sure.
you're not a maniac. You're not sitting there snorting by yourself. You always have an entourage of people with you. So when the party starts, like when I used to go to L.A. with Renee, we used to rent like 2, 3 connecting suites when they had just built the Four Seasons or at the Beverly Wilshire or at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Take a couple of the cabanas out back. You got 6, 7 guys, everybody partying, champagne, coke, and you got 15, 20 hookers coming in or out. Not like one. It's just, it's just, it's like Animal House. It's like fraternity. It's a frat house party, but with expensive, you know, tastes and at expensive places. Uh, we overdid it.
Yeah, I would say so. Once you accidentally threw out $60,000 in a trash chute, that's a bummer. But I guess you probably
Yeah,
didn't care at the time.
yeah, yeah. I just said, well, uh, it goes along with the trade.
Yeah,
It was
you didn't think
crazy.
I should walk downstairs and get that sixty thousand
No,
dollars.
no,
You're just
no,
like,
no, no,
nah.
no, 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 no. Are you crazy? Walking down to a trash chute? No, no. Back then, you had no concept. 60,000 was just like if you threw a shoebox out. Okay, so it's a shoebox. It had some shoes in it. Okay, well, we'll get another pair. This had 60,000. We thought it was the fake shoebox because we had received a bunch of money and there was about 60,000, 45,000. I don't remember it in false bills. And instead of giving those out, you want to just take them out, and we confused the good box with a bad box or something like that, but it went down the trash chute.
Oh my god. I mean, that's like That's a pretty good annual salary for somebody here in the United States in 2022, right? And
Well,
this is like
that
in
was
the 90s.
19 no, that was 1985.
Oh my gosh. So this is it's at least around twice that in today's money. Yeah, that's like a lawyer's annual salary that went
That's
down a trash chute.
crazy. That's
Yeah.
crazy, and everything about that was crazy, and it was over the top. Was it fun? Yes, it was fun. Was it irresponsible? Totally. uh, we were breaking the law, yes, but it was like cat and mouse.
Hey, if you like what you're hearing and seeing, check out the Jordan Harbinger Show podcast feed. There's a lot more just like this. You can find the Jordan Harbinger Show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, back to the show. What happens if you lose a load of cocaine? You know, what happens when it's like, hey, look, the plane went down, or we kicked these bales out and a bunch of them, we don't know where the hell they went.
It's
They only got
happened.
half.
It's
I'm
happened.
sure.
I've lost loads and I've paid for them. All that does is increase your goodwill, and they'll give you more.
Mhm.
It's just like a bank. You know, you pay them back, you lose this, but they lend you more. My goodwill was through the roof. One time with Ivan Urdinola, which he was a very delicate, violent, volatile guy, and he never lost. Even if there was a loss, he wouldn't take it. And we did a load with him, and I went down to his farm and I wrapped, I think it was about 1,000 kilos, 800 kilos, and I wrapped them for an airdrop. And we were scheduled to go on X day, and it was postponed. So I told Ivan, when the merchandise stays there, make sure you don't use that and send that to Mexico. And then when I come back and when I send my pilot to pick it up, and he gets handed the wrong packaging. Sure enough, that happened. I sent my plane and I asked them, "Hey, are you sure that they're going to give them what I wrapped, what we wrapped?" Yeah, 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 yeah. Blah, blah. Sure enough, we airdropped that, and that smashed all over the ocean. It was
Oh.
We had to pick it up, and we delivered to their people here in Miami buckets with the kilos broken, with seawater and coke, just to prove to them. And people always said, this is it. They're going to kill Lewis because Ivan, he doesn't care if you if if he by mistake gave it to the wrong people and you pick, it's still your problem. If this happened, it's your problem. If that happened, it's your problem. It's always your problem. And he actually said, you're right. I'll swallow it. I'm sure he made somebody else pay for it, but he didn't go after me. And everybody said, that's unbelievable. And this guy was he comes out in Narcos. You can see him in Narcos in a couple of I don't know, the Colombian version, but a couple of the shows, Ivan is there.
Yeah,
And he's very well known guy for his violence, his volatile. And yet with me, first day I met him, he gave me an M535. First day I met him at his car dealership. He talked really fast. He gave me a car.
He talked really fast. He probably using a lot of cocaine, right? So of course he talked really fast.
No, not really. Not really. These guys kept it pretty cool. They were just known for their violence, and they killed a lot of people. First day I met him, he gave me $100,000 car.
Wow.
That's what it cost back then in Colombia. An M535 Alpina gearbox, crazy car. And I got along with him just fine. I have a knack for getting along with some real crazy people. I don't know why. I've always had a knack to get along with some real crazy, volatile people. We always got along. I always got along with these guys. They liked me and I liked them. I don't know. Opposites attract. I never carried a gun. Why should I? If I'm hanging out with Ivan, he's got enough guns.
Yeah, you said you survived because you were nonviolent and everyone knew it. And you said your personality was your sword. So, and on this show, we talk a lot about the value of reputation, how your reputation can be like an insurance policy alongside your network. And here, it's kind of literally working for you in that respect because you did have some very close calls with crazy people like Ivan who didn't kill you in part because they knew you were never going to be a physical threat, right?
Never. And they like that about me. They like the part that my craziness wasn't in being violent or vicious. My craziness was in just being one crazy son of a bitch smuggler that was good. They didn't want me to be violent. They just wanted for me to be creative and good at what I did. Schmooze the right people at the border, talk to the right people to do this and do that, have a nice network. That's what they wanted me. They liked me. They liked my honesty. He's so honest that, he tells you up front, I don't carry a gun. The worst thing you can do is lie. Help, these people are the alpha predator. Hey, they are the alpha predator. You can't lie to these people. They have a sense of smell. They'll see you coming a mile away. If you're not a killer, if you're a killer, they know you're a killer. It's one on one. But if you're not, and you give them a bullshit story that you're a killer, they'll smell you out. Then you're being dishonest. So from day one, I told him, listen, I don't know nothing about guns. I don't own a gun. I don't know. I've been around the biggest killers and the biggest criminals that you can imagine as friends. And I treat them with respect because, that's their business and that's what they do. And that's fine. They're hitmen, but they're my friends and I treat them with respect and I don't look down on them. And I'll invite them to have dinner at my dinner table. And I will break bread with them because they are my friends. That they're killers, that's between them and God or them and whoever they want to. But they are my friends. And I treat them with these, and they really say, you come from such a high class, born with a golden spoon in your mouth, went to college, and yet you're so humble. You're here with us, hanging out with us, and you treat us with respect. I've invited them to dinner at my parents' house, not telling my parents who they were.
Yeah, I would
But I
imagine.
felt I felt bad that they had nowhere to go on Easter Sunday, for example. So I said, hey, this is a family day. Your family's in Colombia, come and share. I didn't tell my parents who they were,
Sure.
but
He's an
and they,
exchange student from Colombia. Yeah.
yeah, exchange student from Venezuela. You don't want to say Colombia, but they realized, they said, this guy is so like, he doesn't judge it. And they're used to getting judged all the time. They see that, they smell that. So like Ivan, I'm not going to bullshit Ivan. He is the alpha predator. Ivan, I lost your load, man. You fucked up. What do you mean? Nobody says that to Ivan. Well, and he loved me for it. And to this day, I'm still alive.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
For that to happen with Ivan Urdinola and being alive is like unheard of.
You told me you're more likely to get killed for losing 50 kilos than 50,000 kilos. Why is this? Is it like a bank too big to fail and they want you to owe them versus just being pissed off?
No, ask Trump. Ask Trump. It's the old thing. You're too big to fail.
Mm-hmm.
Even Trump said it. My bankruptcy is so huge in where was it, in Atlantic City, that instead of letting them go under, they lent them more money. So basically, when you lose 5,000 kilos, if they kill you, they lose the 5,000 kilos. If you lose them, not if you steal them. Steal them, you're going to die anyway. But you know, if they feel you're still good for what for your business is still active and your business didn't go under, they'll give you 5,000 more kilos or 10,000 kilos so you can make up what you owe. 50 kilos, you know, they may kill you because you're getting 50 kilos from a broker who got it from a middleman, who got it from a distributor, who got it from a, blah, blah, blah. And, but when you're dealing directly with a source of supply that has hundreds and thousands of kilos, the relationship is a little different.
Mm-hmm.
You're
Yeah.
too big to fail. And, they depend on you to move 20, 30,000 kilos a year. So, you don't want to lose that
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah, that makes sense. You said the Coke was so pure you only do bumps. So when we see them do whole big lines on Narcos and stuff, that's nonsense, right? Because a line of really pure Coke would take you to the moon.
A lot of people did lines. I've seen people do lines, but that was in the early 80s when some of the stuff wasn't that good and a lot of it was cut. But still, I've seen people do lines of pure Coke. It's all what your body gets used to. I always got my body used to just, a bump and a bump. And that's what I got used to. Some people got used to lines, and if their body didn't take a whole hit of a line, but pure Coke is not meant to be done in line. like when we were in Colombia with our friends and we were partying and stuff, we'd have a bag and we just, take a spoon and dip it and boom, boom, you bump it. You don't do line. We did.
So, for people that don't know how to do
Nobody.
cocaine, a bump is when you dip a little, I don't know, like a little metal spoon end or fork or something like that into a bag, and you get like a pinky nail worth of it in your nose instead of a whole big line like you see on TV or in the movies,
Exactly.
or depending on where you went to college, on a table. Right. So how accurate are shows like Narcos and Narcos Mexico? I mean, a lot of the stories and the people are embellished, but did you see that? Would you say like, hey, this is fairly accurate?
Yeah, it is. It is accurate. Amado Carrillo, El Güero Palma, El Chapo, the Arellano brothers. Yeah, they're pretty accurate. Yeah. The Arellano brothers had huge parties in Tijuana. They wore that kind of clothing, those colorful shirts. Benjamin, Ramon, Amado was probably the most successful, one of the richest drug smugglers ever, ever, ever. Uh, some people say he's still alive. I don't think so. But El Chapo. So this is pretty. They do a very good job of portraying in general um, a real picture there.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people listening have definitely loved those shows. I certainly watch all of these. And we had the Narcos guys on a while back, Javier Pena and Steve Murphy, the actual cops, not the actors. That was episode 453 if people want to go back and listen to that. Nice guys, actually, giving talks now and kind of surprised that something they did 20, 30 years ago is now super popular. They weren't expecting that, obviously. Nor were
I
you.
no, uh, like I did two podcasts with Steve Murphy. Great
Mm.
guy, amazing guy, and it's crazy that he was in Colombia when I was in Colombia, and we were both on opposite sides of the same coin because I was working with Pablo when he was hunting Pablo, and I was friends with and worked with Negro Galeano, which Pablo killed, and that was the basis for the creation of Los Pepes and all these characters that are in that series about Steve Murphy and Javier Pena. Uh, I knew these guys, and now I told Steve, "Can you believe this? Like in the '80s, we were on different sides, and now we're doing podcasts
Hmm.
together." And he said, "Yeah, well, Lewis, you were, you were one of them, but you were just there for vacation. Like you weren't really. Yeah, you were one of them. You can't say you weren't, but you never changed who you really were. The business did not change your nature.
Yeah.
I didn't become a killer because I hung around killers. You know, I was always turned on by money, so the greed factor was always there. I was always, you know, money hungry. Yes, and my morality gauge on how to make money was an altogether. I didn't think that what we were doing was that bad. I didn't think it was bad. I knew, I always said, liquor, the people that sell liquor, the people that sell arms. So today coke's illegal, tomorrow it'll be legal. But there's certain things I never did because that was not me, and I was not going to go that far on the morality thing, like kidnapping and killing or human trafficking. It's done, and some people say that what I did is worse, but I just didn't see it as that, and we were just moving a commodity like anything else.
Yeah. I've heard you say I did something illegal, not something immoral.
Yeah, illegal, not immoral. We I try to keep it as much a business as possible. It's an illegal business, but I handled it in a very honest way, in a very humane way. I cannot be responsible for things beyond my reach. It's inhumane when people die of overdose, but you know people get drunk and get in a car and crash every day and die. But as from my end, if I could avoid it, I would avoid the people casualty part. Some things got too out of control that I had no say in it. It just fell into the hands of corporate headquarters, let's say.
Hmm.
Some guy just stole 5,000 kilos because he stole it, because he wanted to. I'll say, can't do anything about that. That's when the office comes in and they handle it at that level. But a friend of mine lost 400 kilos in California, a Mexican friend of mine. And it wasn't really his fault. And I paid for him. Instead of having him whacked, I paid for it. And then we continued working. So I made it up. But anybody else would have said, no, I'm not paying, 400 kilos. That was 4 million dollars.
Wow.
I got charged at 10,000 a kilo. So I didn't get charged full price, but I paid for it.
You said nobody gets in the business to kill people. They get in to make money, and then the business changes you and you end up a killer. What's that process like? How does that happen?
Well, everybody gets in the business to make money. Some people get into the business as a killer because that's what they're good at, to make money. They start out as a killer and they end up owning a cocaine exporting enterprise because they grew in the ranks. But everybody starts out to make money. The killers in the coke business that I've known started as a killer to make money. They didn't start, as a killer just because they enjoyed killing. Although I know of some situations where people lose their mind and then they start enjoying what they're doing and they're psychopaths. Then okay. The other group of people will kill you in a heartbeat because it's business. They will not hesitate to kill you, but it's business. But everybody starts out to make money. Whether you start out like I did, distributing, what I did it for money. I didn't do it for free. I
Hmm.
didn't, well, in my case, I was with a girl that I was enjoying my time with her so much that I just did it to hang out with her. And it, it was just a result of me hanging out with her that I got involved in the business. But at the beginning, I started in the business just to be with her. Living with her and hanging out with her was so great, so much fun that was part of it also. And, and then as a result, I ended up saying yes. I do want to stay in the business because she said, you don't want to stay or do you want to get out?" I says, "No, no, 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 no. I've always loved rock and roll. I always wanted to be a rock and roll drummer, and this is better than rock and roll." So I stayed. And that conversation actually did take place. We were overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge.
You wrote, "If you're scared of dying, don't get into this business." So is it just a young man's game? Like young guys, we don't think we're going to die. Us older guys know we're going to die. I'm not trying to expedite the process.
If I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't even know where to start. I don't think I could do it. Timing is everything. I was at the right time at the right place with the right people and got connected in the right way. Now, while I was doing this, was I thinking of getting busted or dying? No. Because if you're thinking of dying all the time or getting busted all the time, then too much of your thinking is going into that instead of going into being creative, intelligent, and smart and doing what you're doing in the right way.
I mean, true. You had some close calls. Tell us about the crocodile thing. I mean, this was,
Jesus Christ.
this is a clencher.
uh, you know, we worked Cancun for many years. It got to a point where we said we're not working Cancun anymore because it's getting too dangerous. And now you have to pay tribute to Amado Carrillo's group that was run by a guy named Metro. So we decided to stay out of Cancun. But one day I get a phone call and said, "Hey, we got permission to work Cancun." So I said, "Fine." I brought the load into Belize and I traveled from Mexico City to Cancun because we were going to receive the load in Chetumal, which is part of that Cancun area. It falls under the umbrella of the Juarez cartel and under the umbrella of this guy that controlled that whole area. To make a long story short, I traveled to Cancun. And I get to Cancun and I'm trying to find Metro and I can't find them. And I make a couple phone calls and I can't find because I want to tell them, listen, my 600 kilos are in Belize and let me know when you want me to hand them over to your people in Chetumal. So I can't find, so I go to a hotel that I know they own and I have a couple drinks. And then suddenly in through the door comes Metro's number one transport, Gil. So I tell Gil, I said, Gil, I got 600 kilos in Belize and I'm glad you're here. So let's talk about, how am I going to get them over to you? When do you want to do this? So I said, oh, we'll talk about that later. Let's have some drinks and this and that. So we started drinking, started playing pool. So at the end of the night, I said, listen, I want to play tennis tomorrow. So I'm going to go home early. And we had already had quite a few drinks. And it was my idea. And I said, this one last pool game, we'll play for $250,000. If I lose, you give me a $250,000 break on the transport. If I win, you give me a $250,000 break on the transport. If I lose, I give you 50 kilos placed in Cancun. Of the 600 that are in Belize, you take 50 as your own, and 50 at 5,000 a kilo is $250,000.
Mm-hmm.
So I lost. I almost won, but I lost by
Okay.
1 ball or something, 8 ball. So I go home, boom, boom, to wake up the next morning. I'm going to go play tennis. I played tennis. Then I went to my business in Cancun, the coffee business. And I went across the street to make a phone call from a payphone because I never used the phone. Before you know it, I get hit in the back. My hair gets yanked. They want to put me in a Chevrolet truck, Chevy, like a Suburban type, but 2-door, a Denali. Thank God it wasn't a 4-door. This is Metro's people and Metro. He's accusing me that I'm working under the radar, that I should have told him that I was in Cancun working, that according to him, I'm working under the radar, trying to sneak one by him, pulling a fast one on him.
Like you're doing business in his area without letting him in on the business.
Correct.
Got it.
I said, are you nuts? You think I'd be here in Cancun myself on a payphone? On top of that, do you think I would have gone to play pool with he last night? That's all bullshit, this and that. Get him in the truck, get him in the car. So finally, I backflipped in this. I didn't let myself get into the car. Then I said, okay, let's settle down. I'll ride with you, but please just let me ride in the front seat with you. I need to explain. Oh my God, this guy, we're taking this guy, and now next thing you know, he may want to drive. I said, no, just let me go in the front seat. So here I am explaining to this guy this whole thing. He wanted to have nothing of it. He don't want to hear nothing about it. He's driving to the Laguna, and which used to be, was an abandoned theme park. Had green and red pyramids and these concrete, geometrical figures, and it was abandoned. And they used to keep some alligators, crocodiles. It was the type of crocodile back there because the alligators were on the golf course. The alligators are more docile than these crocs, saltwater, freshwater crocs. And we're driving there, and I'm very upset. I mean, I'm terrified because he says I'm going to throw you to the car. The only thing that's going to be left are those shiny little plastic shoes you got, my tennis shoes. And I'm trying to explain to him at the same time. I'm calling Gil nonstop. This guy doesn't answer. I said, oh my God, this guy's on a plane to who knows where, whatever. Hungover, doesn't answer. Right before we're about to get there to the where they kept the crocodiles, and this was known that he used to throw people there. Just before, like 3 minutes before getting there, finally Gil answers the phone because I asked Metro to dial him from his phone. He didn't want to. I convinced him to dial him. He dialed him and he answered. And Metro goes, aquí tengo el colocho, lo voy a tirar en los cocodrilos. Lo único que va a quedar son las zapatillas blancas esas que tiene. Which I have the colocho. The colocho means the Colombian. I have him here in my custody. And I'm going to throw him into the crocodiles. The only thing that's going to be left over are those white shiny sneakers. And he kind of was hung over and says, what? ¿Qué dice? He explained it to him. I said, no, no, don't throw him into the car. He owes me $250,000 from last night. So this guy goes, he's blown away. He thought it was a bullshit story. And he looks at me, and like when somebody looks at you and there's a certain bond, because to him it was so far-fetched, and it turned out to be true that he couldn't believe it. This is, and you know what he said? He said, you know what? You're crazier than I am. You're playing pool with Healy. You lose 200. Not even I do that. $250,000. You have a load in Belize. You're here in Cancun. This is my town. I mean, all these things are so out of alignment with the planet, let's say. And yet, it's true. You did lose 250,000. I mean, he looked at me, and there was a certain bond. Then he dropped me off at the hotel. And then you realize that these kind of people, they're so whacked out. They're so strange. They're so different. The same way there's a look that saves your life. There's a look that you can walk into a restaurant and you look at him the wrong way. He'll put a bullet in your head like nothing. And he'll have his tacos and leave. And yes, that was very close. That was very close. The adrenaline was going. I don't even have words to tell you, because I don't know what I felt. It was just an instant, nonstop, and trying to get that phone call in, knowing your time's running out. And you're not thinking about, is it going to hurt if the crocodiles bite me or eat me? You're not thinking about that. You don't have time to think about that. If you're thinking about that, then you're not using your time properly. You need to make that goddamn phone call. You can't be there crying or, oh, yeah, don't take me. Because the first thing they'll do, look at the little man. He's crying all like a baby. And you lost all that good time when you could have been making a phone call. Either that or thinking of a way to jump out of the truck.
So basically, if you had just gone to bed that night, instead of being a degenerate gambler, you'd be dead by now. You'd be dead.
Dead. If I would have, and I never gambled.
Oh, you never gambled? That was just a one-off?
No, I've only gambled twice in my
funny.
life. Once with Poli, we were playing poker at night with Mario, rest in peace, and rest in peace, Poli, and I lost 100,000. That's it. I never gambled. And that time, for the hell of it, I played, but I went to Vegas to launder money, trade in money for chips, but I'm not a gambler. I just did it for the hell of it.
Wow.
But if I would have gone to bed that night and I would have gotten picked up on that phone and put in that truck, I would have not have that kind of story. I would have just had to say, we have a load. Please believe me. It's for you. Da, 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 da. I could have been dead.
Unbelievable. So how did you retire? Right? You said if you're going to retire, never tell people you're going to retire, because acting educated or better than others is a good way to get killed. But you were, I mean, I assume you were forced into retirement by getting arrested, not because you wanted to retire.
I never wanted to retire. That's how crazy it was. And the feds retired me. They picked me up and they put an end to my career. But if it would have been for me, I was already under indictment, so I had no choice. I had to continue working because I wasn't about to give myself up and go to jail. So I had to continue working. So I would have continued working. But I have a friend of mine that he didn't grow up as a wealthy person. He made a lot of money in the coke business. Then he started going to Paris and being very refined and very educated and that. And he started telling everybody, I'm going to retire and move to Paris and that. And I'm not going to have nothing to do with this BS anymore. One day he got picked up. They kidnapped him. They took all his money because they just said, let him retire. This guy just thinks he comes in, does this, then retires and walks away. But then there was some stories about him that he had done some things that, he cheated some people out of some money, declared some loads that were lost that weren't lost, kept the money, played with that. So, but yes, they did pick him up. They took his money. One morning they said, you're free to leave. He went to the river, bowed down to wash his face. And the guy that took him to the river took a machete and whoop, chopped his head off.
Wow. Yeah.
You
Yeah. So if you want to retire in the business, you literally just have to disappear.
exactly. Don't tell anybody. Don't just disappear.
Let them think your plane went down over the ocean and you just never made it home.
Yeah, yeah. And I know a lot of people that have been very fortunate that they've never been indicted. They've worked 30 years and they're retired. They're sitting back, enjoying their money, no problem.
How much do you think you made over your career as a narco or a smuggler?
How much I made for myself was,
Yeah,
I
for
don't know,
yourself.
I don't know, 50 million, 80 million, I don't know, but kept very little.
Sure.
For the cartels, billions were produced.
Hmm. Is it hard to calculate how much you earn in the business? Because that's a pretty big spread, 50 to 80 million.
Yeah, it is hard. It's hard because it comes in and it goes out, and it's a hard number to pinpoint, but somewhere around there, I guess.
Were you able to stash anything? I mean, I guess you probably can't tell me that because if you get arrested and then you come out, you can't be like, yeah, I had a bunch of money under the mattress.
No, I mean, people know that there's something, there's always been something, you know,
Hmm.
but you know, it's private, but
Yeah.
there's always been something,
Yeah. I
something
figured, of
somewhere.
course it's private. I'm still going to
So,
ask because people are wondering. You know me. Come on. We've had this.
yeah, I mean, there's
You know how this works.
it's a lot of money that went through my hands.
Hmm.
And I should have been more responsible. I should have retired. I'm an educated man. I could have done anything. I could have bought 10 McDonald's franchises back in the 80s. I could have just closed my eyes and just gone like this on a map of Miami and bought 20, 30 properties, 100 apartments. But then I was always so caught up in the business itself. I had to leave the United States. I wanted nothing to do with the US. I didn't want any properties here. So I started investing overseas in macadamia farm in Costa Rica, in Mexico, coffee operations here, in Mexico, latex, this, that. But in the end of the day, there's always something left over. I mean, what can I tell you?
Sure. You said the best thing that ever happened was getting arrested. I couldn't do the right thing myself, quit the business. So somebody had to do it for me. You think you were kind of addicted to the money and the lifestyle, or was it just the thrill of smuggling that kept you hooked?
It, I was in love with my business. It was a business where, I dealt with the highest levels in that industry. So anytime you're in an industry and you're dealing with the highest people in that industry, it's interesting. So, and I've always been someone that wants to make it better and take it to the next level. So we started small. We ended up with freighters. So we grew the business. So as an entrepreneur, I was pretty excited about going to, you know, being at a level of dealing with freighters. And later on, I realized that freighters was a mistake. I should have just dealt with large size boats, but not freighters, not commercial. Freighters are paper trail. I always knew that the paper trail was going to nail us, having to have offices to maintain those freighters and employees. But I was never going to quit. I liked what I did. The thrill also, because it's thrilling, you know, and when you send 5,000, 6,000 kilos and boom, you make it. It's a thrill. It's a thrill. Not only the money, but the act of just, you know, pat and mount.
How long were you then in prison?
5 years.
5 years. Okay. And I guess if I were to ask about regrets, it seems like missing those years with your kids and damaging that relationship has to be it.
Yes. Regrets, not being more mature, more responsible, not saving the amount of money I should have saved, and possibly, getting out in time so that I would have never done prison time. But I never thought I was going to get caught. But yeah, that's one of my regrets. The time lost with my kids is a big, big time regret. And not having been responsible enough to save up more, uh, you know,
Yeah,
not,
separating the business of drugs from the
yeah.
partying, maybe. Yeah.
Oh, and regret is also partying too much,
Yeah.
drinking and snorting. That's a big regret. And that is something that, regardless if you're in whatever business you're in, drinking and partying and snorting um, beyond a certain point, beyond normal, you know, standards is definitely not good. I really think liquor is a bad one. Liquor and coke also.
Your father was a strong figure in your life. He was a good businessman, right, in the sugar business. Do you think by getting into the narco life, maybe there was some betrayal of his values that he would have tried to teach you?
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt. Um, Although I was honest in an illegal business, still, and that's why I always was trying to get into. I was always involved in legal businesses while I was in the illegal business because I always wanted to like feed myself the story that you know, I'm going legit. I'm going legit, and I'm going to honor my dad's tradition of being a great businessman in the legal world. Probably more dishonest people in the legal world than there are in the illegal world. But I always had that dream of someday being able to retire and be totally legit. And that was like, I was lying to myself because I knew I was never going to retire. One thing is to say it, the other thing is uh, your actions, certain actions that prove that you're working on retire. I never did those initial moves to show anybody that I was on my way to retirement. My attitude was always a reckless, crazy, pedal to the metal in the illegal world.
You said that we're never going to be able to sort of fight the war on drugs, interdiction. So catching cocaine smuggling is fruitless. Do you think it's possible to dismantle these organizations? I guess maybe it's better to ask, what do you think needs to happen for us to even make a dent in the war on drugs here? What can we do about this from your
But you
perspective?
you have to legalize it, and once you legalize it, um, the market will level out. Okay, but when, for example, you could cocaine is like bananas or coffee. There's an X amount of cocaine. The production of cocaine is not unlimited. Like United Fruit in Central America, when they wanted to drive up the price of bananas, they used to buy up all the bananas, and there was no banana for anybody else to buy. So they controlled the price. They controlled the physical bananas.
Hmm.
The US government could go in and with the money they spend on the DEA budget and the ICE budget and all this drug, with the tenth of that budget, they could buy up all the coca leaves that are produced down there. So once the government buys it, there's no coca leaf for any cartel organization to buy up. So basically, you put them out of business because you eliminate their supply because there's a limited supply. That's a hard move because number one, the US government is not allowed to buy cocaine. It may be allowed to buy through the agricultural department, let's say the coca leaf,
Hmm.
but it can't buy the powder. So, but then again, you'd have to partner up with criminal groups down there to do the buying for you.
Right.
So you'd empower another type of criminal bad. The best thing is to legalize it. Then you start growing it genetically modified cocaine. Like you have thousands of acres in Kansas with genetically modified corn. You produce the cocaine here, high grade, you legalize it, you tax it. And the guy that unfortunately is hooked on this shit can go to the drugstore and buy a pure packet of cocaine that he knows has no fentanyl. And he knows that someday he can go and get treatment because it's legalized, it's paid taxes, and it's in part of your insurance. Then the price will go down because the US government will sell that for $60 a gram, a super pure product. You buy it in an air conditioned drugstore, not under a bridge, exposing your life to exposing yourself to getting killed. Under those circumstances, you will defeat the cartels. The cartels, that's it. It's just like prohibition. The criminality with booze ended when they legalized liquor. When was the last time you bought liquor from somebody that made it in his bathtub? No. You go to an
Never, yeah, of course. Actually, that's not true. When I lived in Serbia, I drank a lot of that, but that's an exception to the rule.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, yeah,
But,
they love that out there.
You buy liquor at a liquor store, and it's pure. And still, you got people going crazy. But that's what you got to do. And you put that whole mafia, Chicago 20s criminality, and people drive-by shootings and everything that was happening. It died the day they legalized liquor. And Seagrams came in, and the Kennedys were involved, and they got the representations for Scotch, and then but they cleaned it up and they paid taxes. That's the only way you're gonna get the criminality out of the cocaine cartel business. No different. You legalize it and it's over. Now you can buy it legally. That's it. There's no illegality. There's no criminality. There's always going to be somebody selling something on the street. Why buy it from him when it's much easier to drive into Walmart or Walgreens?
I know you're doing consulting here and there for law enforcement. Given your your background and your experience, what types of things are they asking you if you're retired? I gotta say, it scares me a little bit that law enforcement is asking somebody who's been out of the business for decades how things are done. Like, are we that far behind in tradecraft and technology?
No, the things I did, are still being done today. I was in it for so long, for 25 years, that I met so many people, and some people are still active, some people aren't. But there's always something that you need to confirm from somebody that was there, boots on the ground. And I'm not doing that much anymore because remember, I retired 22 years ago. But still, they come to me once in a while with things to help them with, or things that are happening, what I think, or this guy came from the past and this is happening. Could this be related to that or that kind of stuff? Nothing proactive. Like I don't go down to Colombia and infiltrate the drug groups, or anything like that.
Of course.
I have a business to run here, and that takes full-time priority. But consulting, yes, on money laundering situations. Right now, the money situation has totally changed. Before, the Colombians used to take their money to exporters here in Miami, and the exporters used to buy refrigerators and send them to Colombia and launder their money that way. Right now, the Mexicans aren't even messing with it. The Mexicans will, the way the coke comes up through the tunnels, they take that bulk of that cash, billions of dollars, and send it back to Mexico in bulk. Then they put $600 million, $700 million inside a container in cash, send it to China. The Chinese open up the container, take the 600 million, buy pens, Dixie cups, syringes, everything you see in Walmart. They take that money, and with that money, they buy that, and that gets distributed to the whole planet, and it's laundered. So money laundering has changed. No longer do you have the guys walking in with duffel bags into a bank. No longer do you have people giving money to people in exchange houses here. Right now, they don't want to deal with that. There's no paper trail. In bulk, it's taken to Mexico. And in Mexico, it's taken in cash to China. Once it gets to China, you lost it. In China, there is no dirty money. It's money. There is no money laundering. It's money. They have another concept. Dirty money? It doesn't look dirty to me. It looks pretty clean. And that money gets put into the whole global financial or consumer goods industry.
Unbelievable. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. That's probably a whole separate show. Maybe we'll have to have you come back and talk about that. So you mentioned earlier that you wouldn't do this all over again if you could. What would you do instead if you had a replay?
Well, I did what I did because at that time it played out for me in everything's timing. I would have, I think I would have been pretty good as a commodities trader. I would have gotten involved in trading, buying and selling coffee, aluminum, uh, commodities, whether physical or futures, but mostly I think I would have been, because of my nature, I would have been good at that,
Yeah.
at
Well, your dad was in the sugar
trade.
business, right? That
Yeah,
kind of thing.
trading, trading
Yeah.
commodities.
Missed it by
Uh,
that much, right?
I tried to do it. I tried to go back, and I even got subpoenaed and almost got in trouble for contrabanding sugar. It's in the book, Operation Bittersweet.
How does that? Well, actually, that's probably a whole nother episode. And we've already gone pretty long, so I'll leave that as a cliffhanger for people that want to go ahead and grab the book, because contrabanding sugar almost sounds like something that's not real, but apparently it is.
There's more money in that than there was in the coke business. We made a lot of money, and thing is, my partner died, and but it's real. It's real. Anytime you have a subsidy for a product, there's a way around it. You know, so I'll leave it at that. But a chapter in the book, it's called Operation Bittersweet. It was a customs operation focused on what was going on in the mid 80s, a lot of it in Miami, of the contraband of sugar.
Luis, thank you so much. Fascinating conversation. You've had quite an interesting life, and I appreciate that we were able to have this conversation. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Jordan. Really been a great interview, and always, always great talking to you.